Hello and welcome to Plugged In. Today on the show, we're at the opening of BC's first PKD clinic in Surrey. And it's PKD 101 with Dr. B as Mike Bevilacqua talks with Deb about the ABCs of PKD. Then Elaine is back. She is mom to 7-year-old heart transplant recipient and Transplant Games veteran, Addison. Elaine shares more of Addison's journey from transplant recipient to Transplant Games superstar. Then we're on the links with kidney transplant recipient Chad Costello as he practices his swing and trains for the Transplant Games golf tournament that he'll be competing in on July 4th. The excitement's all here on Plugged In, so stay with us. We're here on this glorious summer day at Redwoods Golf Course in Langley, BC, where we're going to be meeting in just a moment Chad Costello, who's a kidney transplant recipient, and he's competing at the Canadian Transplant Games in what sport? Well, golf, of course. He's on the driving range, so let's go catch up with him and see how his training's going.
All right, Riley, you ready to help me train for the Transplant Games?
Yeah.
You want to hit a few balls?
Yeah.
All right, line it up. Okay, watch your feet. Now go ahead and swing. Show me a big hit. All right, I'm here working on correcting my slice. So I just need to adjust the head of the club, have it more squared up with the ball. And I'm gonna go ahead and hit one now. Not too bad, that was pretty straight. Pretty decent shot.
Nice swing, Dad.
Thank you, Riley. Have I improved a little bit lately?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he hit the other ball
I've
again!
been practicing a lot. It's very important that I'm on my game.
That was like
Okay.
tied with the dirt patch.
Great job, Riley. Did really well. All right, that's enough at the range. Let's head up to the chipping green. Sound good? All right, great work, Riley. This is the part of my game that I have most trouble with, but I always enjoy coming out here and practicing as much as possible, doing my best to improve my chipping. And I know eventually I'm going to get one of those in. Take the time, right? Slow down a little bit, take the time, line it up, and make a good shot. The tricky part is getting it in. All right, here we go. Working on my long distance putting. All right, just gonna line up the ball and see if I can put it in on this one. Yes, I'm pretty happy with that shot.
May 30th marked the opening of the first PKD clinic in Surrey, BC. Dr. Mike Bevilacqua was on hand to talk PKD 101 with our plugged-in reporter, Deb Tucker.
In layman's terms, can you describe what polycystic kidney disease, or PKD, means?
Sure. So your kidneys, just to start at the very beginning, are organs that are kind of within your abdomen. Each one's about the size of your fist, and they just kind of happily sit back there. What polycystic disease means is that these kidneys tend to develop many little pockets that we call cysts. They're basically bubbles of fluid. People are allowed to have one or two or a couple of these things, and that can be quite normal, but having many of them, that's where the word polycystic comes from. It's a disease of many cysts of the kidneys. And eventually what happens is these cysts tend to get bigger and bigger and bigger as they fill with fluid. The whole kidneys kind of expand as that happens, and eventually those pockets of fluid impact the kidney's ability to do its job. Those jobs of cleaning the toxins out of the blood and things like that. And that's when it eventually has an impact on people's kidney function. There are other parts of the body that are affected in people living with polycystic disease, so it's not just a kidney disease, but that's the main organ that's involved.
Okay, can you tell me who is affected by PKD?
Many people is the short answer. So people tend to think of diseases as being, genetic diseases as being quite rare. but polycystic kidney disease is actually the most common genetic kidney disease in the world. We see that here in Canada, and we see that everywhere in the world. In BC, if we had to estimate, we'd say there's probably up to 10,000 people living with polycystic disease. So many people are affected by it. One of the things I didn't say earlier, it's a genetic condition, so it's a disease that can be passed down through families. So you can have families where many individuals are living with this disease.
But any person can get it.
Any person. So one of the things that's unique to polycystic disease amongst genetic diseases is that any racial group, any country in the world, anywhere you go, you will see PKD in similar values. Some other genetic diseases are only found in certain pockets or places in the world. Anywhere in the world that you go, you will see polycystic disease.
What are the symptoms of PKD?
A lot of people start to have symptoms as the disease goes forward. So you have to remember that being a genetic disease, this really is a lifelong disease. So early on, the symptoms are nothing. People, can live many years of their life before they start to feel anything, especially with the dominant form. People often are well into adulthood before they even know that they have the condition. But then the symptoms start to come up as the kidneys eventually get bigger. So as those pockets of cysts get bigger and bigger and bigger, the size of the kidneys starts to give people symptoms. People can feel fullness and bloating and actually start to notice their abdomen getting bigger. Sometimes we have men are told that they have a beer belly, or women are asked if they're pregnant, and it's just from the size of the organs that are within there that are making them get bigger. So obviously that can start to have some symptoms. The cysts themselves sometimes can unfortunately even rupture. It's a little bit more complicated, but you can almost think like a balloon popping, that if it gets bigger, it can rupture and things happen, like people can have blood in their urine, they can have pain from that. And there are these organs can be prone to things like infections and kidney stones. So unfortunately, there's many different symptoms that can come along with this. And those symptoms can happen at different parts of the disease. It tends to generally be that as people advance more, they get more symptoms, but it's quite variable. And then ultimately, those are the symptoms that come up just from the kidneys themselves. Ultimately, the kidney function starts to go down, and then people start to have some of those same symptoms of kidney failure that anybody else with kidney disease would have, but that's very late in the disease course.
All right, so we're back and we've pulled Chad off the golf course. It wasn't easy, but we succeeded. Hi Chad, thanks for joining us on Plugged In.
Absolutely.
You're competing at the Canadian Transplant Games, right? July
Yes.
2nd to the 7th is when it's taking place at UBC, and in golf. So you got to tell me about this.
So the golf takes place at the UBC golf course. I'm very excited to play. It'll be my first time playing that course.
Oh,
Yeah, very much looking forward to it.
what kind of competition is it?
It'll be just one round, 18 holes.
Well, you've been on the driving range,
Yes,
practicing your chipping,
that's right.
yeah, practicing the putting. There's a challenge with everybody. What's your least favorite thing to be practicing?
Well, the chipping is by far my most challenging part of my game, so that's something I need to do the most often. But it's tough to get motivated to go out there and do it. So, but I definitely need to go out there and do it more often.
Ah, okay. And your most favorite? What's your cincher that you're gonna?
Well, I thoroughly enjoy driving the ball because I
Oh.
just get to hit something as far as possible.
So we saw you on the driving range earlier, and you actually were with your training partner.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I brought my 8-year-old son along, Riley. He's my training partner when I hit the driving range.
He was giving you some pointers out there
He
too,
was,
I think.
yeah, great pointers. Yeah, he's full of great advice.
And not only that, I think he's one of your biggest cheerleaders. He said he's going to be there cheering you on at the games.
He'll be the loudest one there, I'm sure.
So are you looking forward to this?
Absolutely.
Because you said it's actually your first transplant game that you're going to be competing at, right?
Yes.
So why golf? Of all the sports, why did you pick golf?
It's a great way to spend some time in the outdoors, to socialize with friends and family, and it's just something I've always enjoyed, and I've always been playing it for years. It's a game I really enjoy.
And you're an avid golfer.
Yes,
Are you?
yes, fairly avid golfer. I try to get out as much as I can.
You'll be out there at the UBC golf course competing, right?
Yes.
And we're going to put the information on the screen where anybody living in the Lower Mainland or who's going to be here in the Vancouver area between the 2nd and the 7th can come on out and really cheer on the athletes.
Absolutely, cheer us on, show us some great support.
And it's a great opportunity to also raise awareness about organ donation.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's actually two ways. There could be a registered organ donor, or there's also someone can be a living donor.
Yes.
And that's something that is actually about your story and your journey. Is
Something
that
that's
right?
very important to me and my family. It's a great story.
So stay with us, because coming up next, Wendy, Chad's wife, is going to be joining us, and we're going to go back and talk about his journey with kidney disease that led to a transplant through a living donor.
That's right.
Stay with us. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Now, I just want to go back. You said earlier it's a genetic disease. It's an inherited disease. So can you just talk a little bit more about that? For example, inherited from your parents, and if your parents have it, what are the chances that you may inherit disease?
Every individual that has it has a 50% chance of passing that on to each of their children. So each time it's like flipping a coin, and it doesn't matter how many brothers or sisters you've had that don't have it, every single time afterwards it's the same odds, 50-50 odds. We sometimes hear about conditions skipping generations and things like that. That's something you might see in that recessive form where they can be scattered throughout, but in this dominant form, that's not the case. It's 50-50 and you either have it or you don't. If you inherit it from your parents, then you have a 50-50 chance of passing it on. If you don't inherit it, even though your parents were infected, then that's where it stops in that branch of the family tree. You don't have to worry about passing it on to your children. I might just take a step back for one more thing to mention is that although we say we talk about inheriting it from your parents and 50-50 chance and things like that, about actually a quarter of the people that we meet with polycystic disease have no family background of it whatsoever. So like all genetic diseases, somebody has to be the first one who's affected. And so we do see a lot of those individuals, even though there's never been anyone before, unfortunately they were the first one.
Somebody has to start the chain.
That's right,
Yes.
somebody has to start the chain. And some of it also may have been underdiagnosis in the past, that as people are living longer and longer, it may have been that people in the previous generation passed away before anything was known about it. But now as people are routinely living into their 70s and 80s, again, I think we're seeing more of that disease that probably flew under the radar before. So it is quite common for me to meet somebody who has no known family background, and yet they do have polycystic
Well, that
disease.
makes sense, though. So in terms of diagnosis, how do you diagnose the disease?
Yeah, so our main ways of doing this is with things like imaging tests like an ultrasound or sonogram that, like people have when they're pregnant, that type of test. Because just based on the appearance, we can often make that diagnosis, especially when we have a family history to put together with that. A simple test like an ultrasound is actually very, very, very good to make the diagnosis.
Right now, there's no cure for polycystic kidney disease, but there's certainly, I think, hope for patients. There's new medications that are coming onto the market that are looking at slowing down the progression of the disease. Can you talk a little bit about that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. With polycystic disease, I think this is a very, very hopeful time in the disease. There's a lot of research being done and a lot of developments being made about how to manage this disease. Even compared to 10 years ago, we've learned, many, many things that we had no idea existed before. And part of this is treatment. We've just in Canada a couple of years ago, the first very specific treatment for polycystic disease was approved. And that's, it's a very exciting thing to see. We often see new drugs come through in medicine, but it's rare that you see the very first treatment for a disease that has gone from having no treatments to having one treatment. That's a big, big step, especially for the people and the families who have been living with this disease, for many, many years. This one treatment, it's not a perfect treatment, it's not a cure. It's something that slows down the disease progression, and it really is only applicable to a certain subset of people with polycystic disease. But again, just having that treatment out there is a great first step. And what I can tell you, being kind of having my finger on the pulse in the research in this area, is that there's many more things coming down the pipeline. And I think that before long, you'll see that we've gone from a disease with no treatments to one where we have many treatments. And when we get to that point, that's when I think we'll really start kind of changing the face of PKD and what people experience with it.
And well, that's certainly a hopeful message to end on for PKD patients. Thank you very much, Dr. Bevilacqua.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Deborah.
With Chad, who's going to be golfing at the Canadian Transplant Games, and sitting next to him is lovely wife Wendy. Wendy, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
Okay, so take us back. So we were at 2006, diagnosis. How did the journey go from there?
Well, basically, my numbers were very stable for the next few years after that.
And the numbers you're speaking of are?
So it's creatinine. He went on, he had high blood pressure, which again he wasn't aware of, so he had to go on some medication to help manage those symptoms. He had some dietary restrictions, keeping his potassium levels down and things like that, and he did a really great job of all that management. So his creatinine was stabilized, still really high, and then just watch that. He was getting regular blood tests to check his levels.
And that continued on from 2006 until some point?
It was getting around 2014 or so when things started to decline.
In the summer,
yeah.
And at that point they said that sometimes it can decline quickly and to maybe start thinking about our next steps.
So this is a really, truly inspirational story about a living donor.
Yeah.
So
It really is.
how did that start?
So we went to family and friends and let them know that it was time, that we needed to start looking for a living donor. The doctors really wanted to try and avoid dialysis at all costs, to go straight to a living donor if possible.
So Wendy, that's an important step to
Yeah.
actually share the story
Yeah.
with family and friends. Did you have
Yeah.
table conversations? Did you get on Facebook? What were some of the
We did a
things that
little
you
bit of
did?
both. We recognized what we were asking. We recognized that it was big, that other people have families and loved ones. So we actually went the route of communicating a couple of different ways. We had some heart-to-hearts with some family members, and we also sent out an email just letting them know that you could be a live donor, and the Kidney Foundation was really great about sending out some information for people to let them know that we have 2 kidneys, but we actually only need 1 to survive, and that living donation happens all of the time. And of course, they wouldn't do living donation if it was a danger to a donor. We know how important it is to the program that donor's health is really cared for. And yeah, so we had some family members being tested for a living donor. I was tested to be a living donor, and I was actually a match. So in our heads, I was going to do it. I was going to be the donor, and I was well on my way through that process. And then we received an incredible surprise. A coworker of mine, Sarah Lum, her husband went through a kidney transplant 2 years previous to this summer, where his numbers went down. His donor was a deceased donor, and he was on dialysis for 5 years. And for their family, that was really tough because it affected him not being able to work full time. It was an incredible stress to the family. You know, simple things like traveling. He had to arrange for dialysis if they went anywhere, which you can do, amazingly. You can say we would like to go to California, and they can arrange dialysis for you there, which we thought was amazing. So she actually knew that I was sharing with her at work that this was happening, and she actually put her name in to be a donor for Chad without us knowing. So his numbers kind of tanked in the summer of
2015. Yes.
And December we received a Christmas card from her, basically telling us that she had been approved, that she was a match, and that she was going to go through the process, so that I didn't have to, because we have 2 young children, and she thought it would be less stressful on our family if she donated. So we were blown away. We were blown away because her act was truly selfless, because it's close to her heart. Her husband's been through it, her family's been through it, and she just knew what an incredible gift that would be. And the thing that's so crazy about it is actually Sarah and Chad did not meet for the first time until after the transplant.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was kind of like the big reveal, and so she did this for our family.
On the last episode of Plugged In, we met Elaine Young, whose 7-year-old daughter Addison received a heart transplant when she was just 3 weeks old. Elaine is back again to share some of Addison's post-transplant story of triumph and hope.
So just take me back. You're at this tiny little incubator-sized bed with 25 staff or so around. And are you hearing then, when are you receiving the news that what's going to happen?
Yeah, so it was even risky just to put her on heart-lung bypass. They didn't even know if she'd survive that. Because it's quite a complicated piece of machinery. It involves some surgery to attach it properly. And so we knew she was over that. And so the next step was, let's figure out what's wrong. And so it wasn't until, so that was Monday night, and it wasn't until I think Wednesday that they knew that the only option was a heart transplant. So on Wednesday, they said, we're working her up for transplant. We're going to be listing her as soon as we can. And they told us at the time, they said, you know, she's like the sickest baby in Western Canada. You know, there were so many things happening, and this was actually the first time, it would have been the first time that BC Children's had done a heart transplant on an infant. Most of the kids were being sent to Edmonton, and they gave us that option. So on top of that, we're trying to figure out that. Do we go to Edmonton? Do we stay here? We, of course, ended up deciding to stay in Vancouver for a number of reasons. But so Wednesday, they said we're going to work her up and list her for transplant. Thursday, she was put on the list. And the wait at the time, they said to us, could be, you know, upwards of a year, several months, a year. You really have no idea. Thursday, she was officially listed. Saturday, we get the phone call. It was actually, you know, the nurses are like, oh, Dr. Gandhi, our surgeon, he's on the phone, he wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I go over, pick up the phone, and he asked for me specifically. I mean, my husband Aaron was there too, of course. And then he said, I have a Mother's Day present for you. Because the next day was Mother's Day.
The Sunday.
Yeah. And then he said, I have a heart. And I just was like, Aaron's looking at me, and I'm just like, oh my God, I was speechless. And I just kept saying, are you joking? Are you joking? If this is a joke, this is not funny. And he says, no, he said, I have a heart. And we were just like, how did this even happen? Like, it was just so hard to process that it was happening. So she got her heart on Mother's Day. The heart went in, and that was really successful, but there were some complications afterwards as they were waiting. Because usually what they do is they put the heart in, make sure it works properly, and then they start closing up. But the heart started working and then stopped. And so she was back on life support. They finally took her out of the OR 9 hours later. We really reached, that was the lowest point, I think, for us, that for Aaron and I and for our family, just knowing that we'd come so far and had this huge setback, and that we really didn't know what was going to happen, and that her chances of survival honestly were really not good at that point. And we were obviously so upset, but we decided later that afternoon, you know, that was kind of the moment, I think, for Aaron and I, that we just said, you know what, we're not the ones who are lying there. We're not the ones who are going under this huge physical ordeal, dealing with this surgery. We're not the ones fighting. So the least we can do is, when we're here at her bedside, we're going to be positive, and we're not going to allow people to come in here and be sad and cry at her bedside. I don't know if it was that. I mean, who knows? So many great things happen, obviously. But Sunday, that was Sunday. On Tuesday, they tried taking her off the heart-lung machine, and she wasn't quite ready. But Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday, they took her off, and her heart's been going like gangbusters since then. Yeah. And then we got out of the hospital 3 weeks later.
She's been a fighter, literally all of her life.
She has been. That's been her whole life.
It's a beautiful, beautiful moment. I'm waiting for the book now to come out. This is quite the story. And, well, Elaine, thanks so much for joining me today on Plugged In. I'm looking forward to seeing you and the family, and of course Addison competing at the Transplant Games.
Thanks, Barb.
And if anybody wants more information on the Transplant Games, maybe you can give the website that they can
Absolutely,
check out.
yes. We'll put it on the screen. But it's Canadian Transplant, and on their website you'll find the games.
Hey, did you know that one organ donor can save up to 8 lives? Did you know that you are more likely to need a transplant than become an organ donor? Did you know that the donor decal on your driver's license or care card is now not enough? No. A donation is only considered after all life-saving efforts are made, and it's certain you will not survive. And did you know that 2 doctors not involved in the transplant must declare your death before organ donation can proceed? Any British Columbian who is 19 years or older can register their decision about being an organ donor, and parents can register their children. And did you know you only need to register your decision once? So, register or verify your decision about organ donation at transplant.bc.ca or kidney.bc.ca. Did you know that? Now you do.
Okay, let's talk post-transplant. Tell me about it. When you woke up, what were you thinking?
Well, that moment when I woke up, I felt amazing, felt great. And everything around me was brighter, the colors were more vivid. It was just a spectacular feeling. It felt amazing.
Yeah, I walked into the recovery room and the first thing I noticed is that his coloring was so much better. He was really gray before surgery. He had pink in his cheeks and he literally said, "Oh my goodness, Wendy, like I can see color. Like it's so bright in here." So it was an amazing moment.
While he's going, that day that he's undergoing the transplant, Wendy, what were you feeling? Full of hope, anxiety?
I was mostly, to be honest, concerned for Sarah, for our living donor. Because Chad was really worried about her. It was really funny when they were hooking him up for surgery. His heart rate was really up. But the doctor was able to come in and let him know that she was doing great, and his whole heart rate just dropped. And I think because she's being so selfless, we just really wanted to make sure that everything was good. But they do it all the time. And yeah, I was hopeful. I was excited.
How's Sarah today?
No, she's doing incredible. I feel like she was let go out of hospital after 3 days, 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So she rocked her recovery. She was up and walking the next day. So she took a few weeks off work afterwards, but she's doing great. She's back to all of her regular activities. You would never know.
And you're obviously back to many activities that are important in your life, the Transplant Games being one, but there are others.
Yeah, like golf is a regular part of my life, which I thoroughly enjoy, and I'm super thrilled to be back coaching my son's baseball team, which is a ton of fun for me. And
Slow pitch.
yeah,
So as we say at the Kidney Foundation, Sarah is your kidney hero.
absolutely. It was just truly a selfless act that she did
Yeah.
for us. The
She's an
greatest,
amazing
the
person.
greatest gift ever. So
Yeah, amazing person. And family members and stuff were really blown away after the surgery, going, whoa, like she's doing so great. So I think for other family members to also see, here's a woman who gave up her organ and is healthy and happy and right back to everything so quickly, I think was really powerful as well. What we say to her is she basically gave our children back their dad. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was pretty incredible.
I don't think we could say it any better. Thank you both for coming on Plugged In, sharing your story. And Chad, we're really looking forward to catching up with you at the Transplant Games.
absolutely.
All the
Very
best.
excited. Yeah, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
This is a special message for our kidney hero, Sarah Lam. Thank you. We love you.
I don't remember the specific dates. Can you edit this part?
That's okay, we can edit that out.